So we're going to start off kind of talking about what our goals are for tonight. And really, I think people are always concerned that we're pushing them not to go for guardianship. And what I want to say to you tonight is that really our goal is for you to know what all your options are, because I think that we're already pushing you towards guardianship with a lot of the information that you receive from professionals in your life. And so that's not the only route. And regardless of what decision-making process you choose to support your family member with a disability, they should learn to make as many decisions for themselves as possible. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see our snazzy PowerPoint. And we're going to just walk through that together. And please do ask questions as we go along. And really, I just said what our goal is to make sure people can make informed decisions to the best of their ability so that they can get the appropriate level of support that they need and protection. So we want you to know all your options. I love this quote: "I am my choices. I cannot not choose. If I do not choose, that is still a choice. If faced with inevitable circumstances, we still choose how we are in those circumstances." And it's a Sartre quote. How fancy is that? I want you to think about how this applies to your life during our current pandemic decisions that we have to make every day. So many choices have been taken away from us, but still how you respond in the moment, the decisions that you make every day are yours to be made. And really, I think that's what I like to communicate with everybody here, is to know that every choice, whether you do nothing or you do something, it's still a choice. So Deb's going to talk to us a little bit about what some of the fears families talk to us about.
So I've been in this field for many, many, many years. And what we hear is typically families are really worried about their loved one, about protecting them. They're worried about them being taken advantage of or something bad happening. Many times when a child is getting ready to turn 18, educators will be the ones to encourage families, or healthcare professionals will be the ones to encourage families. And families really listen to that. Those are the professionals that have supported them all the way through until their child does become an adult. So a physician or a teacher telling me you should consider guardianship is many times the way that families start down this process. Sometimes they're even pressured by someone to file for guardianship. And so that's typically why families start down this road. But we know that for the school system, there is the transfer of rights. So when teachers are preparing families for that IEP, when their child will be 18, there will be a transfer of educational rights. And instead of dreading that transfer of educational rights, as a parent, how exciting that my child gets to start really, really, really being the driver of their educational programs. We talk a lot about the bus not stopping coming in the school district, and I think we've all felt it. For every parent, it doesn't have to be at age 18 or 21. We experience the bus stopping coming from the first grade and the second grade and sometimes the preschool. What we want is our children to continue to move forward and make those great decisions. And being able to help in making those educational choices are really important. But what parents really do need to understand is their rights, while they share them with their child because of IRS rules, they are eligible to attend all the IEP meetings, to have all the documentation, and to receive the notices the same as their child. Sharon and I will talk tonight about being really purposeful about planning for these transitions and these changes to prepare your child. And this is a great one and pretty exciting one for children to be able to become adults and be a really partner in their educational decision-making.
I think Deb and I both have had many families call us and say, "Oh my gosh, we're so stressed because our family member is turning 18 in a month and we haven't gotten guardianship." And I want you to know that there's no light bulb that's going to go off, no switch is going to be flipped where suddenly things are going to happen. So take a deep breath. Even if your family member is 18 and they're legally in charge of their own lives, you are still a key person in their support system, and have a lot of power as a parent to continue to offer them support, to offer them guidance, and help them with decision making. So there's plenty of time for things as you move forward. I do want to let you know it's really an exciting time for us to talk about this because Missouri has a new guardianship law. It took us about 3 years to get it updated, and it was passed, I believe, in 2018. And that law really has made a lot of changes in how people can adapt guardianship for their family member, what some alternatives to guardianship that can be considered are, and also to make it easier to go before the court and make changes in an existing guardianship. So I want you to know that from a guardian perspective, our law says the court must consider whether the respondent's needs may be met without the necessity of the appointment of a guardian or conservator or both by a less restrictive alternative. Less restrictive alternatives include, but are not limited to, and they give you this list of 7 items to consider, including things like a power of attorney or a limited guardianship. But number 4 is supported decision-making agreements. And we're going to talk about what that means tonight, because a supported decision-making agreement is really about putting a structure in place, whether informally or formally, to help your family member make the most of decisions. Maybe that means they're going to turn to you for advice. Maybe there's certain decisions they're going to turn over to you, but you can do all of that without going and paying high court fees, without going and having something legally removing the rights of your family member. And I think sometimes we don't really understand fully that when you go and get a guardianship, you are actually more restricted under guardianship than you would be with the rights that are restricted when you are in prison. It's a very restrictive process where you've been deemed unable to really make any decisions for yourself. So we think there's a middle ground for a lot of people. The other thing that Deb always says at this point is that even if you're under guardianship, we still want you to continue to learn about decision making and be able to make the best decisions that you can with the support that you have. So if I have a guardian, I still want to participate in healthcare decisions, in life planning decisions, in decisions about what color coat I'm going to buy this winter. So all those things are things that we should be building into how we work with people, how we support people to have a great life. I do also want to tell you that we are under a very high level of guardianship in Missouri. People with disabilities are. It's interesting to me that over the last 30 years since the Americans with Disabilities Act was passed, guardianship has actually increased by 50%. You might wonder, why would that be? And I don't really have the answer for you, except that I do think it's about our systems and how we communicate about rights and legal responsibility, and we sometimes, I think, put fear into people. 51% of adults currently have full or limited guardianships nationally, and in Missouri that number is over 80%. But our next to neighboring state, Ohio, only has 22% of their adults with disabilities under guardianship. So what are we doing differently? What are they doing differently? So we've been looking at that as a state. We have a coalition that's working on how to help our new law be fully implemented. So we're building a lot of new tools, and I'm going to get to share some drafts of those tools with you tonight. We're going to have a web page about supported decision making, and we're doing a lot of work to help address what doctors, what teachers, what lawyers and public administrators say to people with disabilities and their families, so that there's a level playing field. So we're also pushing this because we know from the research that people that make more decisions for themselves are healthier, they're more independent, they're more well-adjusted, and they are better able to recognize and resist abuse. In addition, if people do not have a guardian, they're more likely to have a paid job, live independently, have friends, go on dates and socialize, and practice the religion of their choice. So those are all things that to me feel like a good quality of life. So it's to you, Deb.
So, as the research tells us, our children will have a better quality of life if we use supported decision making. But as a parent, it's always about the balance of how much autonomy and self determination I want for my child and how much I want to protect them and support them through decision making. And so, this has the graphic of a balance between those things, of many of the things that we really do try and protect our children in community living situations and money management, relationships, health and nutrition. Those are some of the top areas that families are concerned. But we have to remember that while we want to protect our children with that autonomy and self-determination are so vitally important, as Sharon just talked in the research about how you live a good quality of life. So I have the permission to tell the story of the balance of protection and self-determination. I have a son who, at a younger age, with a friend of his, went and bought a lot of equipment. They were going to build their own computer, and he spent a great deal of money from his debit card to buy the parts to build a computer. Now, neither one of them had the ability to build a computer, so it was going to be a lot of money that he was going to be out. His friend was not manipulating him, was not taking advantage of him. They were just both young adults, and they thought it was a great idea. So we sat down and we talked about the money management piece and what that would look like for support and protection. We talked about a shared joint bank account, or that his debit card would alert mom if he spent over a certain amount, and what that would look like and how that would support him. I wanted him to still make his own decisions. It was his money, it was his debit card, but he was making some bad decisions. We were able to return all those computer parts, and he moved forward. And if he wasn't even using it, it would be a good out for him to say, "Oh, that's something I really discussed with my parents before I spend that much money," when he was talking with his friends. It's been a number of years. When I asked him permission to tell that story again tonight on something that would be recorded, he said, "Yeah, as long as you promise to tell him that friend and I have now built that computer." They went back to that same computer store. They spent probably even more money, but he has the best computer. He loves it. It's fast. It's got everything he wants on it. But my point is if I had let him just fail, the balance of that would have tipped really far because he spent a lot of money. But because I wanted him to be able to self-direct and have the freedom to make those choices with his money, what we did was purposefully work on how I could support and protect him while he could still learn autonomy and self-determination. And it's really served him well.
I just love that story so much. And I really want our listeners, our participants tonight, to take a minute and go back to yourself at 16, 18, 20, and think about a decision you made that maybe was really terrible. And think about what the results of that terrible decision were. Hopefully, for most of you, it wasn't a terrible, terrible outcome with a terrible consequence. Most of the time, when we are young adults and we make a bad decision, we maybe suffer a little bit, but we also learn a tremendous amount. And every time you tell that story, Debbie, I think about when I went to college and they had me sign up for credit cards, and I got to learn about paying back credit card debt for quite some time. It was a lesson learned that I had to actually learn more than once.
Autonomy is about self-directing freedom to consent, to refuse consent, like Sharon discussed earlier, to withdraw consent or otherwise control or exercise your control. This is such an important skill that our children need as they grow up and become adults. And it is for their protection. So while we're looking at self-direction and we're looking at autonomy, just think about what this means, that I can consent to something. whether it be a medical procedure or consent to giving out my financial information, or I know how to withdraw consent. As adults, we're faced with this all the time, whether it's in voting or banking or so many other things in relationships. And our children need to know how to do that. It is really a protection for them to be able to know how to do those things, to consent to things that are positive and to withdraw consent when they find it to be negative. Self-determination. We want all of our children to be self-determined. That's what we want for ourselves too. We want the freedom to choose from a very young age. I know we're talking about young adults probably now with most of you, but from a very young age, my 2-year-old grandson wants to choose everything. He wants to make the choice of what to wear, what to eat, what to play with. He really wants to be the boss. He wants to be the boss of himself and the boss of everyone else. And so we have that from a very young age, and it's very empowering. We learn to make good decisions. We learn to have responsibility that provides us with ability to contribute to our community as we grow and we learn. And it really empowers us to figure out what our desires are, what our abilities are, and where we want to put them. And it's the respectful thing to do. To be self-determined, we're giving our child self-respect and self-esteem.
I do feel like I've heard so many stories over the last 6 months about what families have learned about their young adults' ability to make decisions, to speak up for themselves. It's been a really interesting time. So let's get into supported decision-making 101, because that's what you came for. We've made our arguments, so we're hoping at some level you're going to be interested in this process. So really, when we say supported decision-making, this is what it means, that the person is always at the center of decision-making. I'm the one that finally decides between whatever it is my choices are. The individual decides who offers supports. So if I want to get help with my decision-making, I can ask for help from the person I want it from. I still have all my legal rights under supported decision-making. I don't have to pay any fees to have anybody allow me to keep my rights. That's part of what my citizenship guarantees me. And supported decision-making is about teaching individuals about decision-making, self-determination, and details about his or her affairs. And I just wanted you to know that alternatives to guardianship included supported decision-making should always be identified and considered whenever possible prior to the commencement of guardianship proceedings. And that is the position of the National Guardianship Association. So even people that their business is guardianship wants you to be able to learn about options to make sure you're making the best informed choice and being self-determined. So where do you start with all this? You know, the decision making, I love that Deb talked about her grandchild, because children start making decisions very early on. You know, what toy do I want to play with? What outfit do I want to wear? How do I want to interact with the other people and the children around me? So there's opportunities for decision making throughout our life, but sometimes we miss opportunities as we move through the spectrum of activities that we do through different life stages. So for people with disabilities, sometimes the decisions that we start learning to make in elementary school, middle school, high school get stopped. Maybe I don't get an allowance and learn how to budget that money. Maybe I don't get responsibilities where I have to learn what the consequence of not doing my laundry is. Whatever those things are, sometimes we miss opportunities for decision making because we're scaffolding supports for people in their lives. So really focusing on what decisions can my family member make? What decisions do they not want to make, or that can they not make at all? But then really living in the middle of what decisions can they make with some support. So what I'm going to do is go to the website for Charting the Life course, which is a platform for all people, especially individuals with disabilities and their families, to plan and problem solve using these really easy to use, attractive forms. And they've got a beautiful brand new set of forms for supported decision making. So I really want you to see where you can get those and what those look like. We are going to go to the Life Course Nexus now and take a look at the web page. So when you go to Life Course, you're going to see this beautiful young lady, and there's headers at the top that say Life Course Library, Life Course Learning, and so on and so forth. Under the library, you're going to find tools under Exploring Life Domains. And that means different parts of our life, like our daily life and employment, our health, our community living, our respite. Supported decision making is at the bottom of this. So we're going to go to the supported decision making page. And on this page, I've sent you several of the documents on this page. It talks a little bit about what supported decision making looks like. And then there's some tools for you to start thinking about the decision making process with your family member. So this tool for exploring decision making, I'm going to download this sucker really quick here and pull it open and show you what we're talking about. And Deb, please jump in as we go along here. So the first thing you'll see on this tool is that they want to know who's filling it out. Because if you do this with your family member with a disability, if they want to fill it out for themselves and you want to fill it out, that's great. Sometimes that's the best way to have a conversation, is to have both people complete the form and then talk about where they agreed, where they didn't agree, and start to figure out what sorts of supports they might want to talk about together. And you could have many people fill out this form. Maybe a teacher has a different opinion than you do, or a residential provider, or a therapist in that person's life. So your 3 decision points are: I can decide with no extra support is the blue area, I need some support is the purple, or I need someone to decide for me is the green. So when you think about the questions it's asking here under daily life and employment, and I'm going to try and make it a little bit bigger. How's that, Deb?
Good.
All right. Can I decide if or where I want to work? A lot of people are going to say, yes, I've had some volunteer experience. Maybe I've had some work experience. I'm going to be able to tell you the type of job I want. Can I look for and find a job? Well, maybe that's something I need some help with. So how I choose to get that help can be different for everybody, but it's not something that I can do completely independently. How about making purchases? Do I pay my bills on time? So there's a whole set of questions here that is designed to look at every aspect of your life and decide, where do I need help? Do I choose when to go to the doctor or the dentist? If you, like me, get a card from your doctor and your dentist saying it's time to come back, and you can just pick up the phone and call, maybe that's something you can do independently. If you have to be responsible to remember, maybe you need some help. Do I make medical choices about my daily well-being? Do I take care of working out and taking vitamins and all those kinds of things that are just going to keep me healthy on a day-to-day basis? So it walks through levels of questions that are needing to be asked. Maybe somebody makes a lot of day-to-day decisions for themselves, but they really need support if they're going to be in a serious situation, like having to have a surgery or having to sign a contract for a large amount of money. Or maybe there's just one area of their life that they're really struggling with. Maybe they're not making good relationship choices and they need some extra support because they've been hurt and they don't want that to happen again. So this form is available to anybody. You can download it and do it with a family member. You can talk about what sorts of things you learned as you filled out the form. And then there's a few other options that are on here that I just want to share with you. One of, I guess what I really want to open now is this portfolio. Deb, did you want to say anything more about the tools? We're going to go back to it in a minute.
Yeah, I mean, we've had some really wonderful conversations with families that going through the tools with their young adult, they hadn't even thought about some of these topics. And it gave them a time to really go through some things and understand that their young adult had some skills that they didn't know about and other things that they thought, oh, we had a family once that said, I've never really talked about an emergency plan at home with my whole family. It's not just with this child, it's with the rest of my children. So it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, to really go through and think about some things and how to plan and be really purposeful about it.
Mm-hmm. I love the fact that you talked about the whole family, because one of the cool things about these life course tools is they're for anybody. And supported decision making is actually becoming just as important a movement with elder care and elder rights as it is for people with disabilities. So for those of you that have elderly parents, they want to be able to control decisions as they move forward. And sometimes they still can, and sometimes they need support. So this very same document can be used to think forward for any family member who might need some decision-making support.
I said, sometimes even when I'm stumped or somebody else is stumped, Sharon is wonderful about pulling these out and saying, let's do some searching, because supported decision making, I use it every day. I ask for friends and family support in making big decisions in my life. So use it on
Absolutely.
yourself.
So we had a question about whether supported decision making is legal, and it. I guess the answer is yes and no. You can have a written agreement. You can have it notarized. I think it's going to be accepted by people who might, like when I go to the doctor now, they actually ask me who my designated health representative is. So supported decision making is being used generically in a lot of settings. So in settings like that, I think that you're going to have a lot of legal capacity for this. Whether or not this is going to stop somebody from facing really significant consequences of their actions, I'm not so sure that that's the case. At that point, you probably should consult a lawyer. Deb and I are not lawyers. So if you've got somebody that might do something illegal, even if they have a guardian, if they do something illegal, they probably are going to have to go to court and deal with that. So there's a lot of different options with that. And we'll talk briefly about power of attorney and some of those things as components of supported decision making, because one of the things that's nice about this is that with supported decision making, you can layer on pieces that have more legal authority than others. And honestly, the cool thing about some power of attorneys, you can say this power of attorney is in effect for 2 years and then we're going to review it, because I will tell you, having now worked with hundreds of young adults, there is quite a long learning curve for building capacity for good decision making and responsibility. And really, people continue to build those skills up into their 30s. So for somebody that needs this at 18, they may need something very different at 25. And I think Deb alluded to that with her son.
I highlight the story of a friend who has a daughter and she has guardianship of her daughter. Her daughter happens to have a job. And when she got off of work one day, she went and bought some alcohol, went through the checkout line and bought some alcohol, and she has a Missouri ID. So she was eligible. I've never been asked when I check out at the grocery store, are you your own guardian? So mom thought guardianship was going to completely protect her daughter from all of these different things. If they talked about in the healthy living section that she was on some medication, that she should not be drinking alcohol, it was very counterindicated. That was actually more protection than going the guardianship route and taking away her rights to make those. So sometimes supported decision making actually provides you more protection.
Yeah, I think that's really, really a good point. And that's why this decision-making stuff is important, even if you have guardianship. You want to have conversations with your family members so that they really understand what what the implications of their choices are, what an informed choice is. Do they know what their options are? Do they know what the pros and cons of those options are? Nobody can ever make a decision. Well, I shouldn't say that. There are some decisions that are very clear 100% and you know for sure it's the right decision. And there's other decisions that you weigh and you have to make a decision about which is going to be the best way for you to move forward. So the more conversation you have about those things, I think the better muscles you build around decision making. So I want to show you, I've blown up this form, but this is called a portfolio in Charting the Life Course language. And what it does is combine three of their different tools into one 4-page document. So they have multiple portfolios that you can look at. This one is specifically related to supported decision making. And so what they do is start off looking at what do you want your life to be like? So if I want to be able to have my own place to live, if I want to be able to have a job, if I want to be able to have friends and spend my own money, how does that impact my decision making and my choices? Where do I want to be able to build some of my own skills? Where do I want to get help from somebody else? And what do I not want? What are some of the things that I need some support with? Because if I don't get it, I could end up in the not a good life category. It's just smart ways to talk to people about what they want, which is really nice. And then we go over to this side, and it's really talking about what have you done in the past to learn about your rights, to communicate your preferences, and to really follow through when you make a decision. And what do you do when you've had barriers in the past? And then you've got moving forward. What are some of the things I need now for that? So this is the back page of this portfolio. And the front page of it is some of the stuff we already started talking about, which was what decisions are important for me to make? You know, maybe it's really something that I want to do is to make the decisions about who I spend my social time with, but I really don't want to mess with my health care. I'd love to have somebody else figure that out for me. And so that might not be a priority for me right now to learn about. And what kind of supports do I do best with? Do best with looking at videos and learning about things and researching, or do I prefer talking to people that I care about? And then you can go around and look at what your different support options are. So this is one section of the tool for exploring decision making. So we've talked about deciding what decisions are important to you, what decisions are decisions that you can make on your own, and then where are those decisions that fall in the middle where you may need some assistance. So let's look at this list of decisions related to healthy living. And let's talk about taking medication. So maybe routine day-to-day stuff. I'm not bad at, my exercise and some of the other stuff, but I'm not really very good at taking my day-to-day medications. So what you do with this tool called the Integrated Services and Support Star is you put the area you'd like to improve in and get supports in for decision making in the middle. So if I want to get some help on medications, what do I bring to the table? That's the very first part of the star, this light blue piece, is figuring out what is it that I already know. Maybe I know that I'm supposed to take medication every day. Maybe I'm really compliant about taking my medicine. Maybe I even know what kind of medication I take. Are there relationships that can help me? Well, you know what? My mom could call me every day and say, "Did you take your medication, honey?" And she might be willing to do that because she's pretty nice about that. So I might be able to use relationship-based supports. One of the areas I really like with medication is technology. And technology is an area I think we have all grown to know and love over the last 6 months. So let's talk about how technology has changed for medication delivery. I will tell you that I get my medications mailed to me on a regular basis, and I do absolutely nothing so that I don't have to worry about when I'm going to get medication or what needs to happen. I am able to put my medication into one of those week-long boxes. Maybe that's where my mom could come in and help me and just fill my box up once a week, and then I'd be fine every day. But maybe I need something more. So there's smart technology now. Alexa actually tells me every morning at 9 a.m., and I'm telling you the truth. Sharon, have you taken your medication yet? Because that's a really good cue for me to have Alexa just pop on and remind me if I haven't taken it by 9 a.m., I better get on it. There's also medication dispensing machines that you can put 2 months worth of medication in, and they buzz until you take your prescribed dose, and they report back to other people if you don't take your medication. So there are many, many, many things that you could choose to use to be able to take your medication with technology supports. What about community-based? How would I use the community to help me to take my medications regularly? Maybe there's some community health organizations that have some strategies for me. Maybe they've got a chart that would remind me to take medication. Maybe there's a class I could take at the community college or at St. Luke's or somewhere else that would help me learn about medication and making healthy decisions about taking medication. And then the final one is eligibility specific. Maybe my health insurance would allow me to have somebody come to my house and give me my medication. Maybe I could get a home health aide to do that. Maybe there's services that I could get that would provide that. So any decision you want to make, you can go all the way around this star and think about how you would like to solve a problem. So I'm going to put something in the center star now, and I'm actually going to try really hard to be quiet for 2 minutes. And what I'd like you all to do, and you don't have to have a star in front of you. Here's the fun thing. You can have a blank piece of paper and a pencil, or you can hold up your hand and you can think of something, one for each finger, as we go through and talk about these different areas. So Deb, do you have an area you'd like to address?
Well, if we stick in the healthy living, I would like to increase my level of activity because I sit at Zoom meetings all day. I'd like to increase my level of activity and become more fit and healthy.
Okay.
Maybe lose
Okay, everybody.
weight.
So think about Deb and wanting to do physical activity. And I want you to think about, what do you think? I'm going to let Deb do the first part. What do you have to bring to the table, Deb?
Well, one of the things that I have really started using and trying to set goals with is a Fitbit or a fitness monitor that it goes through and it tells me I have not walked in an hour, and it gives me a little buzz and says, you've got 230 steps to go in the next 15 minutes to reach your goal. So I've used this so far to really help me monitor how much I am getting up when I have the opportunity, and tracking the goal of my walking.
All right. So those are the things Debra brings to the table. So think for yourself or for Deb, what would you tell her? What are some ideas about how she could use people to help her build some physical activity into her life? Think about that. All right. So walking buddies, that's absolutely right. A friend might want to do that with you or take a class with you. Excellent. Having a buddy to do any kind of physical activity. You're absolutely right. All right. So let's talk about, even virtual. You're
Even
right.
virtual.
Taking the same yoga class on a screen, but knowing your friend is going to show up there is really important. So what about technology? How can Deb, she already gave you one, the Fitbit. What other kinds of things do we use to build fitness for using technology? It could be low tech. This might be a list of activities. An app like Noom, yes. So apps, there's tons of app technology that could guide you through exercise. Technology like a bike or a timer. Awesome. You guys are rocking. All right. So community-based. It's a little bit of a struggle right now, but how can Deb get out in the community and increase her fitness? There's really a lot of options. Visit the park.
There you go.
Go to the zoo. Marla's on it. Outdoor classes. Yeah, I feel like every time I drive by a park, they're doing some outdoor classes. And they're doing some indoor classes with safety. Go somewhere that you enjoy just to be able to walk more, like the aquarium or a museum. So lots of options in the community. I've been to more parks in the last 6 months, and it's really been great to have that opportunity. So take advantage. And then how would Deb apply eligibility? What could she be eligible for that would allow her to increase her fitness? Somebody said a gym membership. Maybe you're eligible because you have a gym membership to be able to do something.
We have power of attorney for our 20-year-old son, financial and medical power of attorney.
Mm-hmm.
So are you suggesting that this is something to add to that?
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
It would complement what you've already got, because those are more legal things, where this is about really digging down and figuring out how to make those decisions. You get help making decisions all the time. And a lot of times we don't even think about the things that our children might need extra support in making some good decisions.
Did you have a follow-up question, Mary?
Okay. Oh, okay, but just to confirm though, this is basically an agreement between you and your child? There's not really legal ramifications?
Well, it depends how you implement it. This point we're talking about right now is really the learning part of it, figuring out what they can do and where they need help, and then how they could get help in different areas. So that's what we're talking about in the STAR. As we move forward, we'll talk a little bit about how you can formalize this so that you can use it with other people in your child's life. So it's recognized in the law as a legal form of decision making. So if somebody has a supported decision making agreement, you wouldn't be able to keep somebody out of a conversation that they had identified as wanting to be in it. However, for certain things, Deb and I aren't lawyers, so we're not going to be able to say definitively that this will hold up legally under all circumstances where a power of attorney would. So it is more of a supplement to a power of attorney, or for some people, it could replace a power of attorney, and they may not need to go that way. So we'll continue to talk about this, and if I don't answer that fully, we'll come back towards the end. I think we're going to have plenty of time for Q&A towards the end. So I do want to say one more thing about the STAR, though, in that as we talked, Deb, about the many ways that you could perhaps build extra physical activity in your life, I'm betting that there were some things that people said that you thought, no way am I going to do that. And maybe there were some things that sounded very appealing to you. Was there something that you thought, oh, that could be something that would be really good for me?
Yeah, just the concept of going someplace like the zoo or another place where I would just enjoy myself. I would probably be more motivated to go and do something like that. So those suggestions are really helpful. It is that motivation factor. That's one of the important things in that blue box too, is I'm really motivated right now to make those changes in my life. That's an important thing. And because I get to make that decision, no one told me that I have to walk more or that I have to be more active. I'm making that decision. And so under the personal strengths and assets for supported decision making, including your child in what their goal is or what problem they're trying to solve in the middle of that STAR, is very important to achieving those goals. So in supported decision making, what are some of the personal strengths and assets that your child would bring to making good decisions and using supported decision making? One of the things we teach our children from a very young age about safety is to know where they live, to know their address, to know their name, know their contact information. All of those things are personal strengths. So if I'm able to say, I'm in trouble and I need help, my name is Debra Fiasco and I live on Ann Street, That's one of the personal strengths that I might bring to supported decision making and making good decisions. Understanding the concepts of money, and that's again something that we sometimes struggle with our children, is understanding. I pay all the bills for my child while they're a minor, and they don't have to worry about money. You have a credit card. We're at Target, Mom. Buy whatever it is. So as we go into adulthood, having that strength of understanding that money is finite, and how much money I have to budget. Technology, again, Sharon had said technology is huge right now. And we've jumped into so many different areas with technology supporting us in so many things that we never really thought of before. So just the smartphone. So having this smartphone, I have more of a computer in my hand and in my pocket and with me at all times than I had when I was in college or in school. Our smartphones can do so many really positive things to help us. As a reminder, we see a lot of students that are learning at home. Mom and dad are still at work, and I see my friends texting on a regular basis to keep kids back, get them back on track, or doing some FaceTime. So I'm really stuck. I can't get beyond this. I can FaceTime with mom or dad and get some help. So the smartphone's a big one, or the computer. When we talk about money management, again, that online banking, I think is the best thing ever. My money goes in, my bills get paid, I'm never late anymore. It's a wonderful feature. And so if I use it as an adult, why wouldn't I want it to be available to my child so that my child had the benefit of having those wonderful things? GPS devices or safety protection devices, that can sometimes be used to help. So again, community resources. So I talked a little bit about the limited bank account. So while teaching your child and working through some of those money management things, can you set a limit on their debit card? On their ABLE card, you can set limits on how much can be spent at one time or in one day or in one transaction. So helping while they're learning all of those skills, doing that. Maybe it's actually bringing somebody in like an educational advisor or a coach or a clergyman or life coach to help. Relationships. I think relationships are a big one that we tend to not use very often. As a parent and working in this field for many years with lots of parents, we think we can do it all ourselves. We're going to take care of it all, and we are going to sometimes bubble wrap our child and make things right. And we don't ask for help. We're always willing to help other parents, but it's hard sometimes to ask for help. And we need to be very purposeful about that in our decision making and looking at some of those things. Looking at close friends and family who can help, looking at decision-making things like personal contract, which we'll talk about a little bit later, or the power of attorney. And we always want to go to the green area last, that eligibility specific. So in supported decision-making, you might have a service coordinator with the regional office. Things change in the eligibility specific area, and that's why we always look at it last. I have health insurance right now with my school district. I'm eligible for it because I am a full-time employee. That could change. And that eligibility and that insurance could go away. It's the one I have the least control over. So that's the one that we want to look at the last. But there is in money management, you can have a personal representative that helps with money, helps manage your benefits, your SSI, your SSDI, or personal safety. Sometimes we have to go to the route of bringing in law enforcement or bringing in the courts to get personal protection for our adult children, or personal care attendant, or supports and services from agencies.
I think
This is a really nice tool because it's giving you some place to start. I think sometimes when we say, just go ahead and make decisions and you've got all these resources, it's so overwhelmingly open-ended that people don't know what to do. And so if you're feeling that way, you can pull this star up and say, well, what if maybe there is a money management tool that we could use, or maybe we could address safety by going and visiting with the police in our neighborhood. So just a lot of different things to consider. And I think sometimes we just need that. Once you have some ideas about, I'm going to just ask this, so I'm not sure when I got cut off. One of the things that I think is important about the star, what is being able to make a decision among choices. And you may have heard this already before I got cut off, but what I like about the star is that you get to decide which of the things that you're going to do on there. And so picking that gives you buy-in. It gives you connection to your decision. So you're more likely to finish it. I am way more likely to exercise when I'm choosing what type of exercise I do, who I'm going to do it with, when I'm going to do it. So I think I've already said that once, but I'll just carry on again. Who helps you with decisions can be exactly the same thing. And so you might think about, as you're going into decision making, who is the person in my family member's life that they really do want to turn to in these different life domains, and who is a knowledgeable person that I might help them think about turning to. I have different family members. I would go to one of my brothers to talk about financial stuff, but I would not go to the other one and talk about that. And conversely, when I have car problems, I'd go to the one and not the other. So knowing who those people are in your life, not only does it help you have people to reach out to for decision making, I think it also helps families think forward to who else is going to be really connected to my son or daughter, my sibling, who else can fill roles in their life that are meaningful to both parties, so that when I'm not around anymore, there are other people at the table to help them with decision making. And Debra, I don't want to call you out, but I know you've addressed some of this within your own life. Would you like to maybe add to that?
And again, I like to use the word when I'm looking at this as very purposeful. Planning a will, doing some of those legal things that are really hard to think about. It's what keeps us up at night, is how our children will be okay when we're not here. And so in my family, we've kind of faced this when my husband unexpectedly passed away at a pretty young age, about the things that I didn't know in our life, that he hadn't told me things about. And so having to reach out to my community and to my church and to family members about who was going to help me make some of these decisions, I really realized that I need to be, again, purposeful with all of my children, to say, this is a person that you could trust. This is where information is. This is how things are lined out. So to do that with purpose, I think is really important.
So these are the 6 life domains that you can look for in the life course tools, and think forward about who those people are in your family members' lives. And sometimes, again, this is one of those things where a conversation can mean everything. I still think about this young man with so much pleasure. One of the times Deb and I were teaching this session, we were talking about safety and security and financial decision making. And I was asking him to think about who he might want help with in thinking about how to be financially stable. And everybody was in their breakout groups, and I asked for people to give me feedback, and he raised his hand and he said, my personal trainer, I'd want my personal trainer to help me with money management. And I, of course, reacted to that in my head thinking, oh gosh, that is not a really very good choice. But being the good presenter I am, I said, well, can you tell me more about that? Why do you think that they would be good at assisting you? And he said, well, My personal trainer is a 26-year-old guy who owns his own business, and he has a lot of things he's responsible for as far as buying equipment and managing his schedule and figuring out how to save money and pay his bills all at the same time. And I was kind of speechless. I thought, wow, this guy has made a really interesting decision. Based on some really good factors. This is probably somebody that is a savvy financial person. And guess what? If he were to turn to his personal trainer and say, hey, I'm really trying to do better with my money. Do you have any tips? What do you think that guy is going to say? He is going to be thrilled that somebody recognizes in him a strength. And who knows, their relationship might change. I have people in my life that started off as service providers, like personal trainers, who have other roles with me now. They're friends and they're confidants, and they help me with decision making, especially healthy decision making. So I think that we need to not bubble wrap people to the point where they don't get to know people who might actually want to be connecting to them and helping them with making decisions. The flip side of that is when you've got people in your life who are leading you into making bad decisions. And I think that is often a time where we've got a red flag, and you have to kind of look forward as to, do I need to have a legal document in place that's going to help address what's happening? Having said that, though, sometimes, we get guardianship because we don't want our daughter to be around that boy. Well, guess what? You can have a guardian and run off with the boy. So that doesn't necessarily work. But if we were to use some of the same things that everybody else uses and have her get a restraining order. Maybe if he's not treating her well, she needs to get a restraining order, or she needs to go to some relationship training where she can see that he's not really meeting her needs the way she needs them to be met. So again, it's about building skills so that people are safe and healthy and getting the best quality of life.
And going back to that ability to be able to make choices and to take those choices back, and to refuse help from people who are not really helping, and to understand that, and to open up that lane of conversation. And Sharon and I were talking to that young man. Dad thought the same thing at the very beginning. Why would your personal trainer? This gave Dad a really good opportunity to talk to his son. What if the personal trainer takes him down the wrong path? They now have started a conversation, that young man and his father, that they had never had before, that they can check back in and say, so you talked to your personal trainer. Did he give you some good advice? He said, yeah, go and buy whatever. And his dad would then be able to work with him on that. So I think that's important too, is learning from your mistakes after you have gone down this road, to choose people and say, well, I thought my brother-in-law knew about cars, but he steered me wrong. Maybe I'll pick somebody else.
I have had that experience, so I know what you're saying. Yeah, this is sort of a key principle for us at the ARC, and I suspect with the SSD as well, is that we want families, as their kids are starting to get older, to figure out where they can step to the side instead of making decisions for them, move from being their caregiver and decision maker to being their advisor. And that is still an incredibly valuable, necessary role. If you can advise your family member on decision making, you're still actively supporting them to build themselves into that 100% and build themselves towards that life they want. So everybody's always worried about risk. And so I like to kind of show this fun little graph that Debra hates about how to assess whether something's a risky decision or not. So the bar on the bottom is the impact of the behavior. Having sex without protection is probably a major impact from that behavior. It could be really, really problematic. If you look up the bar on the left, the likelihood of something happening Maybe if somebody's going on a date to the movies, the likelihood of them getting into a really inappropriate situation is really pretty unlikely. So that moves it to this medium risk category. You go up from major and over from unlikely. There's a medium risk there. So do you want to let it be a decision the person makes for themselves? Do you want to control it? Or do you want to find some middle ground where you make sure you talk about how much they understand about the consequences of the decisions that they make and what they're thinking about it. I think it's been interesting as we've been in the COVID situation. A lot of people immediately took over healthcare decision for people because the likelihood of them getting a potential disease that we didn't know very much about immediately moved things into the orange or red zone. So we all kind of landed in this overprotected place for ourselves because we knew we had to get a handle on this. And that's fine, because there was uncertainty. There was a lot going on. There was potential healthcare risk that was really significant. So we moved to an extreme point. As we move forward, we continue to look at every decision we make on this block. And it's not the same for every person. When I consider the impact of my behavior going to sit inside in a restaurant, I might perceive that as being a different colored block than Debra does. So I think it's really just a way to really think forward about whether you are imagining the worst case scenario and basing your supports for your family member on the very worst case scenario, or if you are looking at things through a realistic lens. So I just think this is something that's really important to consider as you talk about decision making and as you build up your bag of support options. So we're going to talk about some of the things now that you could access for decision making other than guardianship, because there's a whole bunch of those. So let's move forward and talk about that. Friends and family, we've talked about that already. Advisors and advocacy organizations. At the ARC, we are happy to sit down with people. We teach decision making a lot. We help people mediate conversations when they've gone through those forums through Charting the Life course to talk about, well, how do you both see this? What is it you think is going to work here for you? There's community supports you can consider. Being the representative payee for somebody's benefits is a really pretty simple process to go forward with, so that you are able to control how their money comes in, making sure their bills get paid, and then free up money for personal spending. You can also change the payee. So when your family member becomes more responsible with their money, they can take over and become the payee. Debra mentioned limited or joint bank accounts. As we've moved forward with technology so much, I know a lot of people, we have some people that have joint bank accounts where nobody can withdraw more than $200 without the other one, so that nobody can just have all of their money disappear and go to Vegas. But they also, a lot of people are using a capped debit card. And if you're not familiar with a capped debit card, a lot of banks now will give you a debit card that you can establish the cap on, $50, $100, $25, whatever you want. And it will not work after that. So it's a really good tool to use for people to start having the opportunity to practice spending money and realizing what happens when they overspend and not getting into trouble. And I think I heard Deb mentioning before that with ABLE accounts, you can set an amount on your debit card to have a capped debit card. So if you're not familiar with an ABLE account, that's a different workshop. We've done some presentations about that, but that's a way that people with disabilities can save without it interfering with them being able to access benefits that require financial eligibility. So direct deposit and automatic bill pay, thank God for those things. Those are things I use to manage my life every day. I mentioned protection orders. You can get protection orders without losing any of your own personal rights just because somebody else is infringing on yours. or putting together a personal contract or a supported decision-making agreement. So we're going to show what some of those look like in a minute, but now we'll talk about where people might need to have an attorney.
So you might need an attorney to do power of attorney. There's several types. The durable power of attorney for healthcare, and there's also power of attorney for financial. You can also go to the Missouri Bar Association. We show that resource, I believe, at the very end. Again, so while an attorney is helpful for all of these, the living will, trust, special needs, some of these really require an attorney. Some families have gone the route of just going on the Missouri Bar Association and pulling up the forms and getting them notarized, the power of attorney. I like these, even if I was going to use an attorney, because it explains a lot about what it is, answers a lot of questions, and it'll give you an opportunity to kind of go over it before you're paying whatever it is per hour to go over it with your young adult. I would never want my child to sign a power of attorney without understanding what exactly this means. That it means that they are allowing me to make decisions for them when they cannot make them, or however it's set up. So I think going on the Missouri Bar Association is a great tool for just going over and understanding it. But living will and living trust, special needs trust, finding an attorney who specializes in those areas is probably pretty important. Special needs trust is a way to set aside funds for your child that, again, like the MoAble account, they're a little bit different, but they both do the same kind of thing. They allow your child to have money that is set aside that doesn't impact their Medicaid or their Social Security or some of the other social programs that they will access. Adult protective services, we've talked about that, and then limited guardianship. This new law that went into effect, while it stresses the use of and the consideration of supported decision-making before guardianship is even granted, it encourages family, or it allows families to do some limited guardianship. Families sometimes need to ask for that, that they want their child to retain their right to vote or to their right to marry. So those are some of the things that you would consult an attorney about to have these done. So this goes into the power of attorney. It's a legal document. And what you're saying is they have the legal right to grant you certain powers. So the grantor tailors his or her needs of the document to the specific either financial or medical decisions. It does not protect from bad financial decisions. However, sometimes it can be used to fight a creditor or somebody from bad practices, or if they've cheated you.
I wanted to just jump in because I think Marla made a really good comment in the chats, in that if you are a guardian, when you are doing your annual update now, it asks if there are rights you want restored based on the new law. And they've made that process really simple. So the three rights that they tend to talk about in limited guardianship are the ability to drive, to get married, and to vote. So maybe over the course of time, something's changed, and one of those areas now seems like an appropriate activity for your family member to be able to engage in. All you have to do is write a letter to the probate court judge and say, we'd like this to be reconsidered. And they will just have you come to, it's not even a court setting, it's the courtroom, but you go into a room, talk to the judge, and then they can make a determination about that. So they're trying to make it simpler to reevaluate when rights have been removed from people. So that's really nice.
So the non-healthcare power of attorney includes the authority to access like safety deposit boxes. I don't know if people have safety deposit boxes anymore, but if you can give the right, or to their bank accounts, to sign tax returns, or to handle things with the IRS or tax disputes, litigation on behalf of the principal, or to set up funds or trust or to amend existing trust, make gifts, monetary gifts and regular gifts, and to change the principal's domicile or to move them to a different state. Medicaid eligibility rules are more favorable, transact sales, purchase of stocks, etc. So paying bills. So that financial power of attorney allows for you to choose which of these things or what of those things you need help with and what you want somebody else to have the ability to make those decisions for you. Again, we still encourage the use of supported decision making because while I might be signing a tax return for my loved one or taking care of their bank account or setting up a fund, I would love for them to learn how to do those things themselves and show them how to do it as they need help. To move to a point where they don't maybe need a power of attorney because we've worked through some of these issues.
And I will reiterate at this point that we have lawyers who do workshops for us repeatedly during the year. We want you to consider either attending one of our workshops with one of our lawyers, or all of those are available, not all of them, many of those are available on recorded, where you can watch it in your own time to be able to kind of look back and see what you might need to know about power of attorney, guardianship, and some of those other issues that really are best answered by a lawyer. So there's no one size fits all. We've been really conscious in this new collaborative not to make a Missouri form for supported decision making, because some people just want to do the decision making conversations that we've talked about here, and they don't want to do anything more formal than that. Some people want to be super formal and form an LLC where their child is the center of a board of directors, and each of those board members make decisions on their behalf at a meeting they have quarterly with snacks. So it can be any one of those things and a million things in between. But we do recognize that people need some guidance. You guys are going to be the first people, maybe the first people in the state of Missouri to see these forms that have been drafted up as samples for supported decision making. So supporting decision making agreements are really a contract between the person with a disability and the people that they have chosen to be their decision making supports. So, I talk about buying cars during this session because that's where I need a tremendous amount of support. And again, with a supported decision-making agreement, I might need to have a bunch of technology supports. I might need a bunch of people to help tell me what their decisions about the kind of car I'm going to get are, but ultimately I'm going to decide what kind of car to get. So that's the essence of supported decision-making. So here's some statements that might reflect the way you could have a contract with somebody. Maybe your family member says, I'm not going to buy or sell anything worth more than $500 without my agent's agreement. So I'm not going to do anything without talking to Deb. So that might be the agreement she and her son have. Or I'm going to discuss the situation and make sure that my wishes are considered before my agent decides. So in that case, that's really a power of attorney, that you're going to at least consult what I want before you make the decision on my behalf. It is my and my agent's intent that we will work together to implement this power of attorney. That means that I should retain as much control over my life and make my own decisions with my agent's support to the maximum of my abilities, but I am giving my agent the power to make certain decisions on my behalf. So there's different ways you can frame this. This is the brand new draft form, and there's two different ways they've set this form up. One is really open-ended and one is a checklist. This is going to be a website, Supported Decision Making Missouri. I don't know.
With our new logo.
It's the new logo. I don't know what the final website address is yet, so that's how new it is. There's no website for me to even tell you. This decision starts off with some formal razzmatazz so that you know it's related to a Missouri statute, which everybody, that makes it look more legal. And then it says this document is or is not legally binding. And the reason they put that there is that they want it to be clear that if you already have guardianship or power of attorney, that is not legally binding. If you don't, then it is legally binding. And we're saying right here, it's a legally binding contract. And you can go back to the Missouri statute and see that this is what the law says. So I'm being a little hesitant with you when I've been saying I'm not sure that that'll be recognized as a legal agreement, but it's only because it's new. We haven't really had anybody challenge it yet. So we believe that we've put all the tools in place for this to be a legally binding agreement. It will remain to be seen what kind of challenges come up. So it's got an opening statement saying that these are the people I choose to support me in decision making. They don't make decisions for me. They give me information, advice, and other support so I can make decisions for myself. And then you scroll down and it's got that person's name for signature. So it covers specific things. I do want help with healthcare. Here's a list of people that I might want to help me. So maybe I would choose my sister and my partner and somebody else. Or maybe I just have one person I want to help me. And then there's a list, a yes, no list. They're just trying to make this as easy as possible, but you don't have to use this. I want them to be able to see all my private health information. I want them to be able to make and keep my appointments for me. I want them to understand a healthcare decision so they can help me to understand it. So it goes a long list. Yes, no, yes, no. These supporters may also do these things. So keep going. So maybe for you, there's a specific thing related to your healthcare. Maybe you have adaptive equipment and you want somebody to specifically be the liaison for the adaptive equipment company. Maybe you have a mental health issue and you specifically want a counselor to allow your family member in to the end of your counseling session so that there's no confusion about what's going on. Alternately, you can say what you don't want. I do not want to have somebody in my well woman exam with me, or I really do want to have somebody in my well woman exam with me. So they've laid it out so that you have the opportunity under each life domain to talk about where you want help. Do I want you to look at my bank account? Do I want you to manage my budget? There's things that you might want and not want. So under each area, you can break it down. And guess what? You can review this as often as you want. This is your contractual agreement. So you can decide whether or not, here's a school one. This would be such a cool document, especially leaving high school and going into college, for anybody to be able to talk through with their family. And I know when I left for college, I did not have full decision-making capacity in as many areas as I thought I did. If my parents would have sat me down and asked when I might want help for some things, I bet I would have said, yeah, maybe I could use some help in this area. So here, if your kid is still in high school, there's a bunch of information here. I want you to help me with my special education, my accommodations. I want you to be at all education meetings with me. So those things can be very clearly spelled out.
Well, that one was more of the checkbox. This one is more open-ended. And while we say this is brand new and in draft, see, it doesn't have the yes or no. It's just open-ended to these supporters can help me in these ways. So you can, there always is, and we've discussed this, the concern that if there's a form, then some people will demand a form. So this is not a form that the school can demand or the hospital can demand at this point. There's lots of other sample supported decision-making contracts. Texas has one that's a one-page, pretty simple one. So there's lots of them out there. What we were trying to do in this committee was put together some forms that would cover everything and give families the ability to really go through and customize an agreement that could be used in a more formalized setting for those outside of your home, and to be able to go over like we did in the checklist where it's, I need this much support and I need I don't need support or I don't need help at all.
Well, and I think that's the thing. It's all well and good not to regulate it. And I think that's great for a lot of people, but I also think people need some guidance. That's why I like the stars that have the words already on them. It gives me a menu to
Yep.
choose from. And to me, this is like a menu. But you don't have to use these forms. You can use any platform you want to put together an agreement. So you can even just do simple things like when you get the HIPAA document, you can write directly on a HIPAA document that I give a designated healthcare access to this person and just sign it. So there's a lot of ways to move forward with this. I wanted you to know that this is a national movement. So there's a National Resource Center for Supported Decision Making, www.supporteddecisionmaking.org. They've got webinars and presentations. They've got resources. You can see the forms that other states are using. They can tell you stories about supported decision making and why it's important. So we will have our own state's website that will be connected to this. I would guess in the next 2 months. There's also a state website called moguardianship.com, where all the preliminary work going into changing the guardianship law was done. It's still got some good information, but I don't think it's as up to date as it used to be. So I wanted to make sure that you had more of the current information and then this national website.
I just like the point that you made earlier that this is really applicable to all of us. So I just last night did this with my 85-year-old mother about making health insurance and health decisions. And, you know, they didn't want to talk to me because she didn't have the right paperwork and stuff. So we all need help making decisions. We all need help understanding how to benefit from even bad decisions. And so as a parent, this has really provided me an opportunity to really think through this with all of my children, how I support them in making good decisions, learning from decisions that may not have been the best decision, and working as a family for the betterment of all of us, so that I worry less, because I know that they understand a lot more things about health and finances than they did when I just hoped. Hope is not a strategy. It's
not a great strategy. It's great to
not.
have hope, but you should add on to that.
Yes.
You inspire me because it's funny. I've done some of the other life course tools with my mother to find out what her wishes are, but we haven't really talked about the decision-making one, and it's probably past time to do that. So that'll be my homework following this workshop. We have a question. Our son just turned 18. The school keeps asking if he will continue to live with us. Why do they do that? I don't know, but I will say that part of planning forward is trying to understand what your expectations for the future are. And so I think it can be very daunting to think about your 18-year-old moving out of the house. So, you know, you can say not anytime in the near future, and don't feel bad about that in any way. Fun fact, the average age for people without disabilities to move out of the house is now 26 years old. So, but part of transition planning is asking about those future needs, because at transition, the school is required to address more than your educational needs. And I should really let Debra talk about that, since she's
you got it. You got it. That's exactly right. And so even for just transition planning, we want to know what the goal is. What is the goal post-secondary? And it doesn't have to be set in stone, but we should be planning for the future. I think the thing that we have missed, because we look at that, and I loved when we first started doing this, when Sharon and I first started doing this, I love that families were able to really verbalize and say some of the things they didn't want for their child. They didn't want them to be poor and lonely and sick. But what we haven't done very well, I know I work for the school district, is really setting up the goals of what we do want and helping our children explore. Are you going to move out, and what kind of skills should we be working on right now? Are you going to go on to post-secondary? And what kind of skills should we be working on? Are you going into the work world? We need to prepare you better for those things and being able to advocate for yourself in the working environment. So we need to, as parents, push even more in these transition years about having the school support us in really good goals.
Yeah. And I will say that I think just as a country, we are not as good at having these kind of conversations anyway with anybody in our lives. And so having meaningful conversations about your future, even if your future means 3 months from now, I think are things that are really good for us to start building capacity for. So I'm going to shamelessly promote that we have 2 separate groups for transition planning for both the young adult and the parents. And we've got one for families that are, the individual is going to be very engaged in the process of the meeting where we're talking about employment, maybe college, maybe living on their own. We're starting a brand new one next week, 2 weeks, for families where their kids have more significant support needs, where they're really wanting to plan beyond just what that next step of getting a job might be, but thinking about who's going to be there to take care of my child down the road? What are some of the systems we might need to put in place that's going to be a little bit more family focused or parent focused than family focused. So, so those 2 things are coming up, and Madeline's on here. She leads both of those groups with me. We've got one, October 26th is the one for families that have kids with more significant disabilities. So I do want to also answer this question about, Regina said, I don't think my son is able to verbally choose me as power of attorney. Should I just do guardianship? And I think that's a really impossible question for us to answer. One thing I would say, though, is that verbal communication is only 25% of really our overall communication strategies. So if there's ways for you to determine what his real desires are and have those documented, I think that you don't need to have a verbal response necessarily, but ultimately it's also going to be about whether or not he's going to oppose you. I think if he is choosing to be with you when you're helping him make decisions, if he's not actively fighting against that, those are some of the things that might indicate that he would be supportive of you assisting him in some of these ways. Some of those things are things you just have to talk to a lawyer about. And I don't know, Debra, if you've got other thoughts about that.
No, I agree with you completely. And unfortunately, we should be doing these, having these discussions with preschool parents. Starting this early on is so much better, and starting to prepare for some of those things. And just understanding as parents that we do need to be, again, I'm using the word purposeful about planning for our children's future.
Well, and I do think it's a muscle. We do these planning forward groups where we go through one life domain at a time. And invariably, in the first session or 2, people just mimic what their parents say, or they say, I don't know. But over time, and we do activities. I do this with young teenagers where when they're making decisions, I have them do things like, cross the line. I put a piece of paper, a tape on the floor and say, cross the line if you would choose Pepsi over Sprite. Cross the line if you would rather go to a basketball game or a softball game. And so they make a conscious decision in this kind of active, fun way. But as they start off there, they're able to start, that is in a way articulating what their decisions are. So when we get to the bigger questions of, what's important to you about voting, people will be more used to people asking them what their opinions are, having to make a choice, understanding what the options are. And I see in these groups, six sessions in, all of a sudden, somebody will imply that that there's that they've made a decision that we've never heard them make before?
We're implementing a lot more of the Charting the Life course through our transition program, starting in middle school. So while we preach that we want to start earlier, we're actually doing it. So we're on a year 2 of a couple of pilots.
I got a great question. Has there been any effort to offer information on this topic to the probate court judges and commissioners in this area? And I can definitively say yes. We have some public administrators from different parts of the state on our coalition. We have people that are we have some lawyers on our coalition. And so they're doing things like creating bench cards, which are kind of little cheat sheets for judges to know what's going on. We're trying to get into the professional training calendars of different organizations so that we can work with them. We've been looking at trying to engage DESE at the state level so that we can really impact what kinds of information and forms are coming out through the school that are guiding what kinds of decisions families are making. We've added some information about supported decision making when we do what we call a doc walk, where we deliver information to doctors around the St. Louis area. Because doctors often, when you're taking your child to the doctor, they're often the ones say, you better go get guardianship. And they don't really know what the lay of the land is. So we want to make sure that we're trying to tap into every possible population that is going to be engaged in this conversation. Thanks for asking that question.
That's a good question. It's pretty exciting right now in Missouri how we are collectively as a state moving forward with this topic.
Yeah, we were really lucky. We actually got a federal grant to work with probably the leading person in the supported decision-making movement, Jonathan Martinez, and he's been helping us through 4 or 5 different subcommittees really focus on a variety of things, from how we teach about this, how we market it, how we start to do research so that we can really see what really does happen when people are engaged in supported decision making, good and bad. Maybe, we don't know because it is so new. So Missouri, I'm really proud to say we're going to have some really cutting edge resources and activities going on. And so you guys have come to a workshop really at the very early part of this. So I know that there's been several times where we've said, I really can't answer that. You've got to talk to a lawyer. We really can't step outside our zone of knowledge, but I can say that this is an area of growth and strength in our state. And if you check back with us in a year, there will be something new that we can share with you.
I just really appreciate the opportunity to co-present with Sharon Spurlock and have an opportunity to talk about this really, really important topic for our young adults and for our families. So thank you very much.
Thank you. It means so much to me to have not only somebody from the school system, but to have a parent on this conversation, because if you haven't lived this experience, it's just not the same. So thank you, Debra.